Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Cup of Coffee, the show to go with your morning cup of coffee. I'm Amaan, and this is my co-host, Omar.
Hello everyone and welcome back. So Aman, what have you been thinking about this week?
Well, one major thing that's happened in my life this week that you know about, I've switched to Spotify from Apple Music, so that's been a fun transition for me. I'm enjoying it so much more.
I told you for months that you should have made the switch.
Yeah, it's such a worthwhile switch because they make better playlists for me. I just the interface is a lot nicer, and it connects to my Google Home, and it connects to Discord too. So it's overall it's just so much better, and that's been really
Yeah,
fun for me.
yeah
Um,
I've seen you take advantage of the listening on Discord while you're playing while you were playing Valorant the other day.
yeah, we're just chilling and vibing whenever we're playing games now. So that's been fun for me. I've
hmm
also been thinking because it's quarantine. Obviously, we've mentioned, and I want to take advantage of this time a lot. But I feel like I'm not putting myself out there enough. I feel like I'm not going for things as much as I should, and I feel like in life in general, I haven't really gone out there and chased the dreams that I want to chase, and it's partially because I have fears.
hmm
I it's that feeling of like I want to do it, but I'm afraid maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe I can't get there. But like as we both know, all you have to do is try. But it's just
Right.
that putting in that effort that's been getting to me, and I really want to do all these things. And it's been so it kind of reminds me of this one YouTube channel that I watch called Yes Theory. Their whole thing is to seek discomfort and put yourself out of your comfort zone and go chase those
Right.
fears and chase your dreams, really. And so it's just to me it means a lot to overcome a fear because and it doesn't matter how big or small it is. It could just be like to a certain extent, we are afraid of getting into like a cold shower, even because it's just uncomfortable and it makes you. So I think that in itself is like a small victory, right? And that makes you more accustomed to seeking discomfort and going into your fears. And so any little victory that you can get there, I think is super important towards your main goal, right? Like
hmm
working out, dieting, it's all uncomfortable. We're afraid of losing that junk food. I am, at least, and that
Yeah.
that feeling of not having to work out every day, but it's better for us, right? And so the more we become accustomed to that, the more we're able to chase our bigger dreams and make do whatever we want to do in life, and really change the world. But to get there, you have to be able to face your fears, and that's just something that's been on my mind lately.
Yeah, it's just striking that balance between like being too afraid to try new things and just being just afraid enough so that you're still keeping an eye on things and watching your back and not, going diving off the deep end. Uh, uh,
Yeah.
so striking that balance is what's so hard because you want to be you don't want to be too afraid to the point where you're not trying new things. Not, like it could be like small things like trying new foods and stuff like that. Like if you're too afraid to try the new food just because uh you just want to stick with what you like, you might not discover your new favorite food and a new favorite restaurant. But
Exactly.
like, yeah, but like it's also for bigger things like things you might be passionate about. Like like if you have a passion for writing, maybe you should try running a RPG campaign or something because that
Hmm.
involves a lot of writing creativity, and
Yeah.
and requires you to be creative on the fly as well because you don't really know how the members of the party you're dealing with are going to react to things. So you have to come up with
Hmm.
situations compounding off of that because let's face it, humans are kind of unpredictable,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so you have to be brave enough to try and being a game master or dungeon master isn't an easy thing, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, there's a reason why most people play the game instead of uh,
Yeah.
GM or DM it, right? Because it's
Yeah.
a difficult task, but like it can be if you're not too afraid to do it, it can be incredibly rewarding, like seeing
Hmm.
players go through that journey that you created.
Yeah. And you're gonna mess it up like the first few times you try something new, and that's something that we have to come to terms with. I feel like, and I think that to me is the hardest part, is coming to terms with and really learning from those failures. Because I, like I've made a lot of mistakes, but I haven't necessarily learned from them all and become better from them. Right? Sometimes I'll make the same mistake again, and that's when you have to recognize that you've done, like when you're trying something new, say with this podcast or with anything else that you're trying to do in life, you're gonna do it the first time, and you have a choice essentially when you make that first mistake. When something goes wrong, we have this thing inside of us, and it's because it's very interesting because when we were like when humans were not nearly as advanced as we are now, we had this thing built inside of us, because when something was wrong, when something went wrong, you would run away from it, right? Just a safety mechanism, right? So if there was something going
Hmm.
wrong somewhere, like there was an animal or something that you were afraid of, you would run away from it. And so over the however many years humans have been around, we've gotten this thing built inside of us to where whenever we're afraid of something, we want to run away from it. But now things are a lot safer and a lot better because, you don't have to like build your own fires and run away from tigers and stuff on a daily basis, right? Now our
Hmm.
fears are starting a podcast and, asking girls out and doing like, basic things that we shouldn't really be afraid of. And so
Yeah.
now we have this now we're afraid of things that we don't really need to be afraid of, but yet we try to run away from them. So that feeling of trying to run away from it is something you have to combat at first, and you have to face it. And you not only have to face it, but you have to face it better the next time. You have to learn from your mistake, and you have to do something better. And we always hear it, but
Right.
it's something
Because
that I struggle with, despite knowing that despite hearing it constantly, I somehow manage to repeat my mistakes, and that's something we all have to work on.
I guess the human mind creates a lot of its own problems. We're sort of our best. Our mind is both our best friend and our worst enemy,
Yeah.
because it creates some of the like with your mind you get imagination, you get pleasure. Some of the greatest stuff comes from your mind, but it's
Yeah.
also your worst enemy because it's also constantly tripping you up, making you doubt yourself,
Hmm.
making you afraid. But you just have to learn to work with your mind, I guess.
Yeah, I get that. And it's not just like, I think it's because I mentioned that we're afraid of what like we can't do. But I'm sure you've heard this quote where our biggest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our biggest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure, right? I think it was Bruce Lee who said it, and that's a very interesting quote because we like think about that. Like you're telling yourself that I'm afraid because I don't know if I can do it, but subconsciously you
Mhm.
might actually be afraid because you can do it, and you don't want to lose what you have right now, because we're all so comfortable with our lives right now. We chill through
Right.
the day, we play video games at night, right? We have the life. I got food. I got a 7-Eleven right down my street, and like I can just go get, like, if I don't have time to do these things because I'm working hard on accomplishing my goals, maybe that's what I'm afraid of, right? Maybe subconsciously you're worried that you're going to lose all of this comfort that you have surrounding you right now, and you're not actually afraid that
Mhm.
you're not going to be able to do it. You can, but you don't want to, because your life is going to, you're actually going to have to put in effort now, right? You're afraid of that, and that might be why not everyone in the world is chasing their dreams. And
Right, because we are our worst enemies.
exactly, yeah. But I think, yeah, you could also you could I think it's a very interesting thing to be able to befriend your failures and your fears, and make it so that you're not actually even afraid, or you're not actually even disappointed when you fail. You're excited because it moves you forward, right? You don't think of it as a step back. You think of it as a step in the right direction, because now you know one more thing not to do and you're one step closer to your goal. And that's like, I just don't know how to build that mindset personally, because I try as much as I say it, but I think it just comes with practice, and being able to. So I try in everything that I do now to move on from my failures. Even in video games, like I'm like, okay, what did I do wrong that round? Why did we lose?
Right.
And you know, like why did this podcast not go as well as we might have wanted it to? Why didn't I get the best grade on this test? You know, like thinking about that constantly, I think it would build a habit, and so that's essentially what I'm trying to do.
I think yeah, most of our emotional reactions are, well, in reactions in general, or just most of our mental facets are what we make of them. Like sadness, anger, or even imagination can be both good and bad for you depending on how you use it.
Yeah.
Like I've told y'all about how my imagination works. It's like constantly working.
Yeah.
And you know, like it's a good thing in many ways, because you know you've seen some of the stuff I write. I can get pretty creative with it, but I mean it's also can be pretty debilitating at times. You know, it also means like I get really like anxious about stuff, because I'm just like my imagination constantly. I'm just, it's gonna go this way, it's gonna go that way, it's gonna go terrible.
Yeah, I think at times it's you get scared of like, okay, well, and it's silly to think that you don't do certain things, you don't chase certain dreams just because, you know, it might not go right. Because, well, then you're just where you are now, except maybe one step closer to your goal, right? But for some reason, it's so difficult to get that thought out of your mind. Like, what if it doesn't go right? That anxiety, it's so difficult to move forward from that, despite the fact that it's not really like helping you to just sit around and not do anything, which I feel like I've been doing for way too long. And I like, there's so much out there to do. So, you know, sitting there and not doing any of it is not the solution. Being afraid is not the solution. It's chasing the right fears too. You know, sometimes maybe your fears are warranted. Sometimes, you know, maybe it's not worth your time because it's too long of a shot, right? Or maybe you're not ready for it yet. Maybe you have to wait and become better before. So, for example, you know, we can't apply for certain jobs yet. Just feel like we can't start certain businesses yet because we don't have the knowledge, right? Maybe we would learn something from it, but maybe we're not ready for that, right? So maybe start like a different business, or maybe learn something, spend a couple months learning something first, prepare yourself, right? So that you can overcome that fear with better preparation, right? So it depends on what the fear is too, whether you just want to jump into it or whether you want to prepare for it in advance. But regardless of it, you have to have a plan.
It's like bosses or raids in video games. Like you can't just jump it. Like it's okay to be afraid, to be like, I can't take this boss, or I can't complete this raid head on. I need preparation.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, because there's no, because I mean, like, failure's good, and you can learn from it, but there's no point in failing for pointless reasons.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, I have a friend in Valorant who, when we were playing unrated, he uses this gun that's incredibly hard to use because it's a sniper, but you have to get a headshot to get the kill, right? And so it's really hard to use, but he's using it to improve his aim. And so, but once we get into competitive, he knows that like that's not the right gun to use. But maybe, you know, like after enough practice, he can use that gun in competitive and be really good with it. And that'd be a huge advantage to him. But right now, you know, you're just preparing for the competitive. You're just preparing for the real deal sometimes. And, you know, like what you learn over time can be valuable if you're willing to own up to your mistakes. And yeah, that's really all it is. It's just easier said than done for a lot of us.
Yeah, and speaking of fears and our minds being our worst enemy, so I've been thinking about this a lot. But like, phobias are a product of our minds, and they're kind of irrational, and we're afraid of them for no reason. But we still have them.
Yeah.
So what's an irrational phobia you have?
I don't know. I always had this thing that like I don't know like I would like in elementary and middle school I would put my underwear on in the morning thinking like the one day that I forget to put on my underwear because I was little, right? I was like the one day that I forget to put on my underwear, that's the day that I'm gonna get pantsed. I've never been pantsed in my life, but I was just like, like I have to wear this. This is my duty to wear this underwear today because if I don't do it, I'm gonna get pantsed. Like that's just the law of nature. Like that's gonna happen the one day that I don't. And I don't know why I had this mindset. Like it would just always be in my head when I put on my underwear. And now that I think about it, it's just really stupid. Like it was. I don't think I still have this fear, but I still haven't forgotten to wear my underwear ever. But it's just, I guess that's an irrational fear that I had at some point in my life.
Yeah, for me, it's dogs. I have this weird phobia of them, just because whenever I see one, I don't know. It's for a lot of brown people, I think. You just instinctively just start backing away.
Yeah.
I'm just like it's a cute dog. It's not gonna hurt me, but why am I walking in the opposite direction?
Yeah. I guess I used to be like that too. And then like one time I decided to walk towards it instead of away from it, and it's just like it was just cute, and like I just petted it and everything, and it was great. And so now I'm not afraid of dogs anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't seem to work because like my cousins have got a dog, and I went into their yard and they brushed me, and I pretty much just like in Tom and Jerry where they just run up a tree and just hug it. That was pretty much just me.
Yeah, I understand though, because initially it's like, okay, well, it's a dog. It has sharp teeth, and it could bite me. But yeah, after a while, like my mom's afraid of cats for some reason, and I just
my brothers are afraid of cats, but I just don't get it. I'm just like cats are great.
What are they gonna do, man?
I'm just like the cat doesn't care about you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not gonna hurt you. It doesn't care about you enough to want to hurt you.
Yeah, and even if it does bite you or scratch you, like it's not gonna hurt. It doesn't. I've been bitten and scratched by a cat. Not that bad.
Yeah, it's our brains. They're just like you know what? I've decided I want to be afraid of this thing, and you know what? I'm gonna be afraid of it.
Yeah, it's weird like that. I have a cousin whose wife is afraid of buttons. Buttons. Like
the ones on your clothes.
Buttons on your. He wears no shirts with buttons ever because his wife is afraid of them. And it's like it's not like afraid necessarily, but she gets nauseous around them, and like she just feels like she has to throw up whenever there's buttons around. Like it's the weirdest thing. Like she can't be too close to them, I guess, or like look at them.
I guess they didn't go together to many formal events then.
No, it's funny because we were at a wedding when she mentioned that, and I was like, what? It must have sucked for you, man.
Yeah, because originally I was like, does he mean like pressing buttons? Because I was like, elevators are going to be a pain.
No. I'm pressing buttons would suck too, but then to what extent, right? Like, because if like maybe like physical buttons only, but then like everything has buttons, They're like, what if it was even virtual buttons, like pressing play on a video or something like that, man? That would be horrible. That would be horrific.
Yeah, I mean, using a laptop would just be would be torture.
Yeah, all the keys on the keyboard are technically buttons.
They just lock you up in Guantanamo Bay and just hand you a keyboard and just like, no.
Type this out for me. Oh God. Facing Your Fears 101 with Umar and Amaan. Lock you in a room and leave you alone with it. I'm gonna lock you in a room and leave you alone with a dog. That's how it's gonna work. You're gonna leave me alone with a pile of underpants. Don't put them on.
Yeah, you must have a horrible time when walking past the underwear section of like Walmart.
Not anymore. Okay.
Just looking around you, just waiting to get pants. It's like that's why I started wearing suspenders. So they can't pants me anymore.
Yeah, that's smart. Actually, I considered that investment. Well, anyways, that's enough of us two. Now for the slightly more interesting part, for our guest Uzair Alpial. He will introduce him when he gets here.
All right, cue musical transition. We'll see you guys in a few seconds. All right, everyone, welcome back. We're here with our guest, Uzair. Uzair, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey guys, my name is Uzair. I'm currently a college student, and like every other brown kid, I'm on the pre-medical track, and I'm really happy to be here with my good friends Umar and Amaan.
Awesome. This is going to be a fun little episode because, in case you guys didn't know, Uzair is kind of a genius. So,
not at all.
Uzair, our first question is going to be something we love to ask people, just to get to know you a little bit better. What is something that you're a huge nerd about?
So I'm usually a pretty boring person. So as a result, a lot of my interests are very, very mundane. But one thing that I've really become obsessed about as of late is Islamic history. Basically, and to be particular, Abbasid and Ottoman history, because I didn't learn a lot about those periods of Islamic history growing up, so I've become really enthralled in trying to learn everything about those things.
WAP sort of skims over that.
Yeah.
Maybe history really does not do justice to it.
It's really interesting. I kind of wanted to learn about, because the reason I got really interested in it was because oftentimes we hear about how the East didn't contribute much to the intellectual science of the Judeo-Christian West. So I became really fascinated with getting to know how East Asia and then the Middle East and South Asia made their contributions to sort of the pillars of intellectual thought that we have today. And I found a lot of interesting stuff. Like, it's really cool to know how all the world, through different cultures and different areas, had such significant roles in establishing, the ideas and things that we have today.
Is there a particular facet that really interests you, like the philosophy, or is it more the scientific part of it?
For me, it was more so philosophical. I really liked learning about how the Muslim world rediscovered Aristotelian and Platonic texts, and then through the Crusades, those were introduced back to Europe. And I really liked learning about comparisons of things like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of thought in what you would say, Islamic empires in comparison to their non-Muslim contemporaries.
Wow, that's really interesting, and it's really cool to see like the impact that people had so many years ago, like hundreds of years ago, to our daily lives today. I mean, philosophically, and then even like technology wise, what was happening back then. It's crazy to think that like when you learn like math and architecture in school, in college, sometimes you're just like, wow, this is so crazy. Like, I couldn't have come up with this myself, and you don't know people that would have been able to come up with it today. And people are doing this hundreds of years ago with such little technology. All they had was books and each other, really, to come up with algebra. I mean, the story of Newton coming up with physics is insane. Like, he reached the limit of physics, so he invented calculus to keep himself going. Like, that is insane.
Right.
But you see things like that in the old Eastern empires so much, because They were, I think, algebra was invented because they were building a masjid, right?
Yeah, something like that. So yeah, they came up with, I think, what was it, like there was an individual who came up, they had algorithms, and then from the idea of algorithms, they were able to develop algebra for an
That's
architectural project.
that's so cool. And
So I mean, like, so that means like you can see the impact today in like our modern computers. They wouldn't exist without it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. It's really, mind-boggling and really interesting to see how people in the past have had such a profound impact on things that we use today.
Yeah, I'm not huge on history, but I have played Civilization, so I've got a little bit of experience.
Love Civilization, dude.
Yeah, if I told me he got you to download
it's pretty dope. It's pretty dope.
So that's cool. Tell us a little bit about your background in debate.
So I started speech and debate when I was in ninth grade, in freshman year of high school. And I really just started it because, like, growing up, I felt like I had an interest in, like, politics and particularly foreign policy and international relations. Back in middle school, like, we had to do stuff like mock trial and all that for social studies. And, whenever we would engage in sort of an argumentative activity, I enjoyed it. I really, as a person, I really dislike arguing. I don't like getting into senseless arguments with anyone. I don't like talking when there's nothing, substantial to be said or something of substance to be articulated. But the thing that I liked about the idea of speech and debate was that, we'll get to converse about different meaningful topics. So, and this is what I thought, it'll be in a friendly, non-aggressive environment. So I was really into that. So when I started in ninth grade, there are different events, like you guys know, in speech and debate that you can compete in. And the one that I was really interested in, or I ended up becoming interested in by 10th grade, was international extemporaneous speaking. Like you guys know, extemp, like that's when you basically answer questions that are related to the world, global affairs, international relations, foreign policy. And like you guys know, you select a topic, you get 30 minutes to prepare a 7-minute speech on it, and then you go answer that question and all that. And yeah, so like in debate in and of itself, like I look back at it now and like it's funny because a lot of the things that I remember aren't really the competitions. The things that I really remember are like the friends that I made in it, and like the relationships that I made with, my teachers and all that. Like I thought that stuff was great. Now I remember 9th and 10th grade, I was a really pricky little kid because I remember like I would like do well at some like little local tournament, and I would start thinking in my head like, wow, like I'm really getting good at this. Like I'm really good. And like, it's so funny because then I would go to like state or national, like state or like a high level competition, and I would just like not do well. And it would be because I hadn't built up that level of skill or like that level of stamina. And it would be, and like, I still look back at it, I just think it's so funny that like at some local tournament, like, like there's this high school in our local area, Creekview, which has a good tournament. But I went to this tournament and like I ended up getting lucky and I got 5th at this tournament, and it was complete luck. And that was my first tournament in extemp, and I still remember like that made me think like I was good at extemp, which is just hilarious.
We had the opposite of good luck at our first tournament.
Yeah. But we always had some. But we don't talk about it.
Dude, it happens. I did PF with Floss for 2 years. That's why I didn't fully start getting into extemp until 10th grade. And the thing is, right, when we did PF, like Floss did a solid amount of work. Like he really put in the effort. And I feel like I did work too, but every now and then where I could like get away with things, I did, right? Like it was more of an excuse just to hang out and play 2K all the time. So like that was like my first.
I mean, Amaan and I did PF together for 2 years, right? And like whenever we got together at each other's houses to work on our cases, we didn't get any work done.
It's so hard.
The only time we got work done was when we were separate from each other.
That's what happened to us too. It's so hard to just focus when you're with like the other person, because like I heard this from one person. They were like, the best way to do well in public forum is not to be friends with your partner. I don't think that's true. But I was also like, that's no fun either. Like, come on.
Yeah, I was like, I wouldn't have enjoyed debate as much as I did if I didn't have Amaan with me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like you can definitely do well with like a partner who's your friend. Like that's definitely possible.
Yeah.
Like, but I still remember that. But then like I started getting into extem. Like I started getting, especially going into my junior year. Dude, the funniest thing, bro. So when I went into my junior year, like we went to Plano West, right? Which at that time was starting to get, which had for a few years now produced really good competitors in a variety of events in speech and debate.
Mhm.
So when we went in, I guess like our teachers, like, you know, Smith and Leo, they had great expectations. And there were people in our class, particularly in extent, who were already pretty well established, who were pretty good.
Yeah.
The most I'd done is like gone to state, went to an out round. That's all I had. And I remember like she would not like give me any attention, right? And that made me think, like rightfully so, but that made me think, man, she hates me. This woman absolutely hates me. And I remember like my first tournament that year, like I didn't do well. Like I don't even think I broke, even though like I'd gotten experience with speech and debate, and like I didn't know anything. And like compounding on that, one thing that I didn't like about speech and debate was like there's so much networking that goes on between competitors because so many people go to camp, right?
Yeah,
Camp is so expensive. I mean,
yeah, I noticed that it's like if you don't go to camps and stuff, it can get really hard to compete because because Aman and I didn't have any. I mean, it's not the only reason we didn't do great, but
Yeah, we also didn't put enough effort into it.
yeah, but like, we and like there's a lot of factors into why we didn't do great, but like we also didn't really have connections with debaters from other schools. Like you talk to them after rounds and stuff, but then we'd go to our separate ways. Like I think like the only connection we had to another debater was I think his name was Dante, and that's because you went to driver school with him.
Oh wow!
I met this kid at
like that's the thing.
And like, he offered to swap prep with us once, and we were like,
yeah.
no.
I was like, listen,
Really?
I'm not allowed to do that.
Yeah,
it was after Smith. It was after Smith got really annoyed about that, and we were like, ha ha ha. No, thank you.
Yeah, not worth the risk, bro. But that's the thing about debate camps at that time. It would create a sort of like elitist environment where you'd have all those people that were considered very, very like top tier at whatever tournament you were at, and they would be hanging out together. And like you would always think like, man, dude, like I'm gonna suck compared to these kids, bro, because like they keep like doing really well, and they all know each other, and all these judges and well-known people in the so-called debate community.
Debate is kind of like pre-politics.
A little bit, yeah. It's very interesting, and not to say there aren't great, fantastic people in there who.
No, there are plenty of fantastic people, like present company included.
Exactly, like, but you will always have like that little in any environment. I think you'll have that little bit of elitism, but. One thing that did happen to me personally in speech and debate was because I was competing in extent and the kids around me were very good in my class at my school. Slowly, because I always practiced around them and we had such great teachers. Like we don't give enough credit to these teachers. I feel like in the end, I didn't need a camp because of those teachers and all those kids who had went to camp. Like they brought that information to our school. And so slowly I started getting better. And like junior year, I felt like I finally became like a national level competitor, I would say. It's not like I'm saying I was the best or anything like that, but I finally...
I mean, you were the best.
Technically, you were the best.
Junior year, like I was, like senior year, like it ended up going well for me in the end. But junior year, like I think I can confidently say that I was finally someone who, like, when I went to a tournament, people generally knew who I was. People, not that stuff matters, but people generally, like, they gave me that sort of credit. Even though every now and then, like, I would get irritated if I go to a tournament and I do well and I hear someone say, oh, like, he just got lucky or anything. And it would be, that type of stuff is irritating because it's like, dude, this is the third tournament you're saying this at. Like, can you just, like, admit it? Like, I'm decent. Like, you can just say I'm decent.
I mean, there's like ups and downs with the Plano West name. Like it came with some clout, right? Because like even when we'd go to rounds, we'd be like, oh, they're from Plano West. Like we weren't great, but like because we were Plano West, they were a bit wary.
Yeah.
Yeah, like exactly, like that's what would happen. Like it would. I always thought that was like really funny. Like people watch it.
It's like we were on the Warriors or something. Like, oh man.
Yeah, it's so funny. The funniest, like the thing that would always make me laugh is like they probably look at like these kids like, oh, look at Play the West, and like they don't hear our conversations in private, like this dumb stuff.
We're just like, yeah, it's just we're all just. Yeah, because like they're like, oh, it's playing OS. Meanwhile, Amaan and I half an hour before we're instead of doing prep, we're playing Rocket League.
Yeah, and like exactly. They think we have like these super intense practices, and yeah, like sometimes we did, but like half the time it was just me trying to pull like pranks on other people, like just dumb pranks on Ashwin.
Yeah, I just like, and all of practice would just be groaning at Ashwin's puns.
It would just be great.
Like, it was amazing.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, it ended up going well. Like my senior year, I think things finally started clicking. Like I went, like I'd won local tournaments from like my sophomore year and onwards, but like senior year, like I started placing a lot. I started winning like every local tournament, almost every local tournament I go to. Like I always like final or get top three. Like I felt like I was in a good place. But I went to a couple national level tournaments where I did get to out rounds. Like I advanced past the preliminary rounds, but I didn't get as far as I wanted to. We went to Harvard. So second semester, because second semester was like second semester of senior year, like when we went on these debate trips, like the main thing that I was looking forward to was the fact that it's like a vacation, like we just get to enjoy these different cities. But like there was also like this level of like urgency in my head, like I want to do really well at these competitions. So my sophomore year, like the Harvard tournament, it's a big national tournament. I got to semis and like so that's like, and I like in terms of placement, I would be like top 10 at that tournament. Out of like, I don't know, 250 or 300 competitors in my event. And then Harvard, my senior year, my goal was, hey, I got to get to the finals this year. And that was really heartbreaking because, so wait, let me even backtrack. Before that, there was this tournament called the Capital City Round Robin. Sorry, I'm giving you guys this whole layout of my stupid my senior year. But it's just to show like, so this is like the ups and downs that I went through, particularly my senior year. So my junior year, even though I thought I started getting good, there's this round robin tournament for extempers in Texas that's called the Capital City Round Robin, and it's an invitational. And like my junior year, I didn't get invited, and I was like, yeah, sure. Like I guess I haven't done anything yet to really deserve that invitation. But my senior year, I got invited, and I was really happy about it. And when I went, like it's 16 competitors, and they basically all compete against each other. And then from like a bunch of I think you have a total of 6 rounds. They select the top 4, and I was lucky enough to get into that top 4. So after that happened, I was like, okay, I'm good enough to compete with like these people at like the top level. I think I'm not saying I'm better than anyone, but I'm not saying I'm lesser than anyone either, right? Like I can learn from these people and compete with them. Then I went to Harvard.
Confidence, but not cockiness.
Exactly. Like arrogance is always a bad thing, right? But you should believe in yourself. Then I went to Harvard, and that was heartbreaking because I didn't get past semis again. I dropped in semis again at Harvard. So I was a little heartbroken, but it was still a fun trip and I enjoyed it. And then state was coming around, and like state was like a big thing. I was like, dude, I really think that at state I can do well. I can really get far. So I get to semifinals, right? And in extent, I would always say there's this thing called the zone, where if you practice and you start getting into a rhythm, every single speech that you give in every round, that you start having fluency. You're not having any problems with your fluency anymore. It's all coming down to your analysis. So I was feeling really good about my speeches. And I go into semis and I get a topic that I was very familiar with. And I went and I thought the best speech that I could on it. And I felt very, very good about it. Very confident. And I was like, you know what? I think I did it. And I was really happy inside. I wasn't telling anyone anything, but inside I was feeling like, man, I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to get to state finals and I'm going to get to compete in state finals. And I didn't break. Like I did not break to finals. And I remember that point, because it was senior year, like I was kind of done, right? I was like, that really ticked me off, really irritated me, because I felt like I really deserved to be in finals. And I didn't really, and I got back my judging sheets, and like even me and like our teachers looked at them and we were like, this doesn't make sense. Like I was really frustrated. And at that point I was almost like, I was so done with debate. And like, I even remember, because for that extent, like you have these, like you guys know, these tournaments you can qualify for, like the Tournament of Champions, right? TOC.
Yeah.
They're in May. They're right before AP exams. So I remember my junior year, I went to them and I told myself, hey, senior year, I'm going to go to these and compete in these. Now, at this point, I qualified for nationals, but I only went to, like, you have to go to these national qualifying tournaments to qualify for the national tournament.
Right.
And I only went to that because I was one of the presidents or captains of the speech and debate team. And like our teachers, like they were like, hey, like we do all this stuff to you. Don't you think you owe this to us? And I felt that. And I was like, yeah, I do owe this to you. Like I'll go and I'll compete. And I was happy to qualify for the national tournament, but I wasn't that excited in going to the national tournament. And I was so done with debate that I didn't even go to any of the TOCs. Like I qualified for both of the TOCs. Everyone else who was like a high level exam competitor in our class went. I didn't go because I was like, I don't want to do this. Like, I'm not interested in this. I'll go to nationals because I owe that to you guys, but I won't do anything else. But then, and for nationals, like we graduated, like we had a graduation ceremony, and the week after, we were going to go to nationals. And I remember like all that practice, it was happening during Ramadan. And I was really done with it. I would be really tough. Yeah. And so I would go to practice and I would be really annoyed. I would be really like, I don't want to do this. Like, because I was frustrated, right? Because like state left a very bitter taste in my mouth where I was like, that was the first time ever where I felt like when I did my best, I didn't get as far as I thought I would. Right. Mm-hmm. So I was like, is there really a point to all of this? But then, our teachers, like they gave me like a sort of pep talk or whatever. Not like a pep talk. They were more or less like, you need to get it together and stop being a fool. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I need to we're going to go to Fort Lauderdale for a week. It's going to be fun. Like I might as well like do everything that I can to do my best. And then when we got to nationals, like alhamdulillah, I was lucky enough that things clicked. And like, I ended up being fortunate enough to win the whole thing. And like that was like
I remember when it was announced. I was like, yeah,
like we did it.
Great. I was really happy. Like I was like, it was fortunate because like it was like I like we're like those kids that like we didn't go to camps, right? I'm not saying we're underprivileged or anything like that because we went to a school like we were surrounded by so many people who had that advantage of going to camps and they could share that knowledge with us, right? But we are those kids that are like usually thought of as underdogs and we're overlooked and we didn't go to camps. So like when that panned out, it was like credit goes to like, our peers, like our teammates and our teachers for helping us so much, for getting us to that level.
So Amaan and I both, we failed a bunch in speech and debate, but we did gain a whole bunch. Like, I think without speech and debate, we probably wouldn't have started this podcast. Just because we got to know each other better through speech and debate, and also, it made us both a bit more confident enough to put our voice out.
Yeah.
Into a more public space. On top of that, I learned a lot of note-taking skills that made university a lot easier, just because of all the shorthand and different note-taking methods you learn while flowing. Because you have to listen to a person talk for 2 to 4 minutes and just jot down pretty much everything they say, depending on how good your memory is, right? And with that, you have to come up with a whole bunch of shorthand, and I ended up using that for pretty much all my classes. And then, you also gain those analytical skills, and, you know how to use, and, you get, because we don't really use a script for this. We use an outline. That's a big part of that's the speech and debate background. Because for example, you don't write down your whole speech. You write down an outline, and then you remember the key words, and then expand upon them with improvise to expand upon them. Basically,
you fill in the rhetoric.
Yeah, because sure. it's a vague roadmap, but you're the one that builds the path and finds the way to get there. To the destination.
I think that's the best way of putting it. It's you have a roadmap, but you create your own journey. Mm-hmm. So I think a good.
So what important like skills or like knowledge or life lesson would you have said is some of your most important takeaways from debate?
In terms of skills, I definitely think public speaking and being able to condense a large amount of information in a small amount of time, those are the 2 biggest takeaways in that area from speech and debate, because through the event that I competed in, I got so used to consolidating a huge amount of information into a summary in a small amount of time. And I got very used to also conveying that in a manner which was both efficient and, effective, that my public speaking skills got better. So now whenever I'm in a situation where I have to engage in public speaking, it's very easy for me. It's very natural. And usually it ends up going very well, as I'm sure you guys have had that same experience. Then in terms of, I guess you could say, after skills like lessons, the biggest lessons I think would be, if you work hard, like you can get to some semblance of your goals, right? Because as I mentioned earlier, we were those kids that didn't go to camps, and a lot of times at tournaments, that sort of demographic of competitors, it gets a little bit ostracized, or they feel like outsiders because they don't know everyone there, and they weren't practicing the way everyone else was during the summer. Mm-hmm. But because like we were really focused on working hard and learning from others who knew more than us, we were still able to have some level of success, right? So that's what it taught me. It taught me really the importance of hard work, and how essential it is to really believe in yourself while not being arrogant. The other lesson that it taught me was that being arrogant is really annoying, because sometimes people in speech and debate can be very arrogant. And I hope I was not one of those people. And if I was, I definitely think I'm not anymore.
No, I don't. From my experience, you definitely weren't. But we've had our fair share of arrogant folks.
Yeah, you always.
It's the worst when they're not that good and they're arrogant. I'm just like, where is it coming from?
It's always it's perplexing. Like being arrogant in any case is bad, and a lot of times like the people that were like really big jerks and were super overconfident were individuals that weren't that great to begin with. Like they were okay.
Yeah,
I would always leave one thing.
I'm just like, what made you? Why are you arrogant? I don't understand. Like, if you're good and you're arrogant, I would understand. I wouldn't like it, but I understand why you're arrogant. I don't get why you're arrogant.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, those are my biggest takeaways from all of that.
So I want to know, I want to hear this from the #1 foreign exchange speaker in 2018. Were you afraid the first time that you went into a tournament? And I assume you were, but like, how was that? How was overcoming that? How did you force yourself to go through that? What was the experience like to start off for the first time?
So the first tournament that I competed in extemp, I was really terrified. And part of the reason why I was terrified was because I didn't know at all what I was doing. Because in it, with the part where you select your topics, as you guys know, is known as draw. And I did not know how draw worked at all.
I didn't either. I accidentally took out like too many pieces of paper and no one noticed.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was going with my friend to this tournament, and I remember on the way asking them, "So how does draw work exactly?" And he said to me, "You're asking me this now?" And I was like, "Yes." Like, I'm sorry, I didn't prepare the way I should have prepared, and I was really terrified. And that first tournament, I feel like the jitters don't ever fully go away, but I definitely think that those jitters starting out, where you're just so nervous because you don't know anything either, and you're always scared of the fact that you're already petrified enough in the beginning that you're going to be speaking in front of a judge who you think is going to scrutinize every little thing that you say. But on top, obviously, when you become a judge, you kind of understand that not necessarily every judge thinks that way.
Yeah, because we're all judges now.
Yeah, but then that other fear starts kicking in. If you get lucky enough to advance, that, oh my gosh, like my competitors sometimes are sitting in on my rounds. Oh, other people are sitting in on these rounds. They actually assume that I know what I'm talking about. And what if I say something that's just completely off base? Or what if
no one would know?
Right?
Because everyone's just faking it to make it.
Exactly. So I was really scared in the beginning, but as time went on, I got pretty comfortable with it, because I always did like public speaking to an extent. I did enjoy it even before I joined speech and debate, but it takes some time to get used to that format that we were competing in.
I think part of what helps is realizing that your opponent probably has the same fear inside of them.
Yeah.
Because because like you go into a PF round, you're just a little bit nervous. You're like, these guys dress well, they look pretty smart, and then you're just thinking, I don't know if I'm going to be good enough. And then on the other side of them, they're probably thinking the same thing.
Yeah, always.
And
Always.
I assume that being able to overcome that fear, like the first time up until nationals, probably allowed you to probably made you a lot more confident in the way that you speak and pretty much everything that you do right now.
And to some degree, I think even the judges are a little bit nervous to some degree. Like when I first started out judging, I'm not so nervous anymore because I've done so many tournaments. But like when I first started, I was a little bit afraid because like I wanted to judge the round properly. I didn't want to make any mistakes and be known as that idiot judge that never gets anything right.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's what we like. That's what you want to avoid when you finally start judging.
Exactly, and I think one more thing that I'd like to know is it might not necessarily have come from your speech and debate life, but at any point in your life, is there a time that you overcame a fear that you had or put yourself into an incredibly uncomfortable situation and it really paid off for you? It made a huge impact in your life.
So whenever I think about this, the one thing that I always go back to is that, and this is like, I don't mean to get personal and I don't mean to always come back to this topic or anything like that. But I do remember like when I was in 7th grade in middle school, there was this one kid who would always be berating on, Muslims and the Muslim world and Islam as a whole. And I remember being very scared of speaking to this kid because he seemed to have a lot of friends, right? And I didn't want to be thrown into an environment where I was talking about something that was so uncomfortable and could be misconstrued as controversial, right? But the thing was, this kid and I, we were both on like our middle school basketball teams, right? So I had to see this kid every day. And like at face value, I didn't think he was a bad kid either. I just felt that he didn't have all the right information. So, and I was super scared of talking to this kid or anything like that. And I didn't know everything. And so I didn't want to jump into a situation where I didn't have all the information. But I do remember one day he was just saying all this stuff that was, in all honesty, very offensive, right? And I was very surprised that, even looking back at it now, I'm very surprised that at that young of an age, when only 13 years old, this individual was saying that sort of stuff. Clearly, they were getting it from home. They were hearing it at home from something their parents were either saying or their parents were playing, right? Yeah. So I ended up speaking with this person, and I tried to do it in the best way that I could, in a mannerful way, in an approach that wasn't rude. And thankfully, it actually paid off. Like, it genuinely paid off. I was able to talk to this person and, kind of speak. And we were 13-year-olds. Like, we have no like, we're not scholars and we don't have any sort of like, we're not great intellectuals. We were having very simplistic our conversations. But and that was something I remember I was so scared of doing that, right? Because I was really, at that time, I remember I was just really scared that like he'll tell his friends about it and everyone will like call me out on it on the basketball team and everyone will talk about it in class and all that. But this kid, when I was able to talk to him, like, it went well and he understood and it kind of changed his views. And that was like a fear that I overcame, because what it taught me was that when you feel like something is right, when you feel like you have to do the right thing, always try to do the right thing, as hard as it might seem, because it'll pay off eventually. Maybe not materially, but you'll feel in your heart that you did the right thing. And it also taught me that in many situations, I'm not saying all, but in many situations, the right conversations can enlighten people, right? You have to be ready to take that step with people. And also, you have to be ready to defend your views. Don't blindly believe in something if you also want to argue in favor of it, right? Right. If you want to be able to defend it, then you should probably look into how to do that in a certain situations. So
I understand that.
And you should,
I think nowadays we're way too afraid of having this conversation. We always see that, like our political views are so affected by, like, what we see on Twitter and Instagram and in the media. And, we never really like see any conversation happening. There's always just one side attacking another. Absolutely. And they're never actually having that conversation.
I think it, like, all, like, political views seem like way too binary these.
Yes,
exactly.
It's either you're for or you're against. There aren't any, like, nuanced opinions. You don't really have discussion. You're either arguing one side or arguing the other. There's sort of nothing in between.
There's no conversation of, okay, well, what if this happened? And like, you have to be able to understand that if someone is saying, okay, like, what if this side might be right, they're not agreeing with this side. They're not, like, saying, like, it's sometimes the topics get very sensitive, so it's hard to say, like, okay, well, what if he's not that bad of a person? What if it, was something that, like, happened that day, or what if this has happened to him before? And like, depending on the situation, you might have to ask these questions, but we don't ask these questions. It just becomes like, no, this was wrong, and this person, we, like, a lot of people say, like, we should ban all guns, right? And I'm not saying that I'm for or against guns or anything, but we just have to ask the question, like, what benefits are there, and what are the pros and cons? Just put down the list. You don't just, like, dismiss the conversation as a whole at the beginning, right? Because one side, like, you have to be willing to admit that you could be wrong. There's a 50-50 chance in every argument that you could be wrong. So just look at the facts, and you don't have to be disrespectful about it. And I think that's a huge thing that we've learned in speech and debate.
I think people are just, because you're always debating both sides of a topic in debate. So you learn to see it from both perspectives. But I guess people are afraid of being wrong.
I think so.
Like like it's like, because if you're wrong and if you're wrong about one thing, then you start questioning yourself and thinking, what if I'm wrong about a whole bunch of stuff?
Yeah, that's true. Like, I think you really hit it on the nail there, both of you, because one thing it comes from, I think, sometimes an unsureness of one's convictions, because they're afraid, like you said, like, it'll be a domino effect. If I'm wrong on this, am I wrong on everything?
Yeah.
And more than that, even when people have conversations like these, like the one that we're having right now, it gets misconstrued by many individuals as being, oh, so you basically are in favor of people who deny science, in favor of people who say that that black is white and white is black and up is down, and et cetera, right? And I think there's a middle ground where you can say, hey, I'm not saying, I'll give you a very blatant example. I'm not denying that wearing masks is helpful. Wearing masks is helpful, right? Right? That, like, it's essential if we want to curb this ongoing pandemic of the coronavirus, right? And obviously, I don't want to make a political statement, but what the current federal administration is doing in regards to their approach, it's wrong. They're ostracizing people that they don't need to be doing. They're condemning officials who are just trying to do their jobs, right? That's the absolute truth, right? But then if I say something like, oh, like, let's talk about the issue of gun control in a nuanced manner, that individual that's watching this would sort of their own type of aggressive lens, they'll misconstrue that as being like, oh, so if he's saying this, he probably aligns with this side of the political aisle on everything. And the fact is, like, we haven't even made a political statement. And with the gun issue in particular, I think you brought up a great point, because the thing is, right, I think in regards to gun control, we definitely need some form of it. We need to have a nuanced conversation about it, because oftentimes people that are talking about gun control, they're falling on their rhetoric is falling on deaf ears, because most of the people that they're conversing about it with are individuals that agree with them, right? People on the other side of the political spectrum, the argument that they always bring against those individuals is, oh, they don't know enough about guns. Like, if I ask them to, like, differentiate between, like, an assault rifle or this type of gun, they won't be able to do it. So what they don't even know what they're trying to ban, right? So that's where that nuanced conversation comes in, where it's like, you need to learn the entirety of what you're talking about. It's not that I disagree with what you're saying, is that in order to better ferment and protect your argument and convince others, you need to show them that you're entirely articulate on the points which you're, talking about.
I think
Yeah.
that's the issue for a lot of things, because oftentimes people will form an opinion before they find out what they're really forming, what they're making an opinion on.
To them, it's more about being right than actually having the right conversation.
And that's where the extremities of cancel culture come in.
Yeah, because like the moment you say something wrong, then your argument, or even part of your argument that could have been right, is completely invalidated.
Exactly, and that's not to say we're not saying that racism is not racist. Like
I'm not saying like some of these people don't deserve what happened to them. Just for assault and stuff like that. Like the people who have come out to speak with them, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
But make it, if you make a mistake, or one part gets taken, or one thing you said gets taken out of context, out of a larger thing you're saying, and that gets completely turned against you, and you completely lose everything up. That's when that's when you're going too far.
Exactly. And when we're talking about this, we're talking about nuanced discussions. We're not talking about when you take these really serious topics like assault and violence and racism, things like that, right? That's an entirely different issue, because in that context, that's we're not defending people who are guilty of those acts. We're talking about nuanced political discussions, nuanced social discussions, because it's automatically if you try to have one type of discussion, you're grouped in with an entire group of people that you're not with. You can recognize institutional racism, things like police brutality, faults of the government, and things like that, while still saying that, hey, we should reach out to people who think differently than us, because we need to understand why they think that way. We need to understand what led them to have this conviction, so that we can talk about it. Obviously, if someone is blatantly they're blatantly racist, despite attempts to teach them about the wrongs of that type of conviction, and that type of thinking is leading them to bring harm to others, that's wrong. People that have crossed lines in terms of people's physical space and assaulted them in some way, that's absolutely wrong, right? But when we're talking about someone statement of someone was taken out of context, or someone holds this certain political view, we can't automatically jump to cancel them or group them with other people without understanding them, because at the end of the day, that delegitimizes your argument, because people on the other side will always be like, oh, they didn't even understand what this person was saying.
I think a big part of it is that so much political discourse happens on Twitter. And there's only so much you can fit into one tweet. So you just you can't really have nuanced discussions on Twitter. It's just people yelling catchphrases at each other, essentially.
People tweeting very obvious things and getting a lot of likes for it is generally what happens.
It's really true. It's just about like a lot of people just do it about being woke, right? They don't care necessarily about what's the truth. A great example of that is I don't know if it was a year or two ago, but there were these kids that were on a field trip, right? Obviously, there were a bunch of white boys, right? I'm just going to put it out. There were a bunch of white boys that were on a field trip. And for whatever reason, they were in D.C., and I think they got MAGA hats. I hate MAGA hats, right? But they had MAGA hats, whatever. They can wear them, right? And so there was I can't remember where they were at, but there was a Native American demonstration going on, right? And to preface this, I'm all in favor of Native American rights and, the fact that they've been disenfranchised. And, there's a whole nother topic, but the reservations were set up in a way for them to fail. Absolutely. All of that is absolutely true, right? But this kid, this one white boy, he was wearing a MAGA hat, right? And this one individual who was a part of the demonstration was beating on a traditional drum, I believe. And for whatever reason, they decided this individual, and they were wearing their traditional headgear and traditional clothing, and they decided to approach that kid and stand in front of them, right? Now, this was a young teenager, right? I'm not saying what this person did was right or what they did was wrong. Anyone here, right? But someone recorded that clip, right? And this kid, he didn't really know what was going on, because this person just approached him and stood in front of them and started beating the drum. So he started just laughing, because that was his defense mechanism, right? And when that person put up that video on Twitter, everyone started showing it oh, there was this Native American demonstration going on, and this kid came up to them and started ridiculing them and getting in their face and started laughing, right? And so it was and that kid then got threatened and all that. Now look, I definitely, if he's wearing a MAGA hat, I definitely hate and disagree with his political beliefs, and whatever those Native Americans were demonstrating for, like whatever they were protesting for, I'm sure it had a right cause. And I'm not saying what that Native American individual did was wrong, but I definitely am condemning the actions of people on Twitter going out and accusing someone of things they didn't do, because again, that then delegitimizes your whole argument, because now people on the extreme of the other side, all they're going to say is, look at these people. They just take everything out of context. They just want to attack people for no reason. And then the legitimate arguments that are there to be made, like, for example, what those Native Americans were protesting for, those don't get the light of day.
Yeah. Yeah, you never see both sides. And I think one thing like that we can all learn from, when I was down a YouTube hole one night, I was watching some Jordan Peterson videos, and I saw actually a comment about two videos that I had seen. One of them was Jordan Peterson talking to someone about the wage gap in England. And another one was him having like an argument about something that he had said one time on a podcast. And you could see the difference, because in one of them, he was constantly making points and then being told, okay, so you're saying, and then, you know, she would try to refute his argument. But in the other one, when he was trying to say something and make a point, the guy would say, okay, I could be wrong, but my understanding of what you're saying is this. And the difference between those two is the difference between having a normal conversation and completely, you know, undermining and canceling someone's argument without even considering it, right? Yeah. You know, one thing is you saying like, okay, so you're saying this and just completely ignoring what they said and putting words in their mouth. And one thing is, you know, like, okay, well, I understand that I could be wrong, right? And I want to understand what you're saying because you could be right. And then that lowers the other person's guards and allows them to understand your point as well. And you might not agree at the end of it, but at least you guys will understand each other's points better. And at the very least, if you're not going to spark change, that is your best chance at creating change in people's beliefs. And at the very least, if you're not going to get there, if you're not going to change someone's beliefs, at least there's not hatred involved in that conversation.
Yeah. And see, and you nailed it right there. And again, the most important thing that people would need to take away from this is not to say that, oh, someone who goes and murders someone, or someone who's like in a white supremacist group, we're like, oh, you don't have to cancel that person. Oh, he might be a really good person. Yeah. We're not talking about extremes. Yeah. We're talking about, like, for example, that Jordan Peterson example that you gave, right? You can't just take a snippet of what someone said out of context and then, group, like, generalize them as a whole. You have to really understand what they're saying, where they're coming from, and why they think the way they do. Maybe there's a lot of common ground that you can find. And like you said, it's through that type of discussion that you can actually change people's minds.
Yeah. And just a lighter question I wanted to ask, just to end it off, is because we've been talking about a lot of figures today. So what are some of your favorite pieces of horror media?
Favorite pieces of horror media, dude. So I can honestly say not many. I'm so sometimes terrified of horror films. These are the horror films that terrify me, right? If it's a horror movie about ghosts, I never am scared of that issue, because I'm always like, well, whatever, that's not real. If it's about monsters, whatever. I never think, because I'm always like, that stuff's not real, right? The inner Muslim boy in me comes out when it's ever like something about like demons or jinns or something. That, I don't know why that stuff scares me so much. Because I keep watching it, I'm like, okay, well, this is not real. Like I don't know. I mean, not in the sense like jinn aren't real. I'm in the sense that like this is a movie, right? And half the time, like, they'll be like, this is based on true events, and it won't even be based on true events. But me just seeing that line, it'll like make my heart like beating, and I'll be like, what are you talking? And I'll watch a movie alone, and I won't like get scared or anything, right? I'll watch it and I'll be like, yeah, that's stupid, that's super dumb, that's stupid. And then at 3 a.m. in the middle of the night, I'll wake up and I'll be like, man, I'm scared. And I'll just like put my blanket over me, and I'll just be like, as if like if there's some entity in the room, like my blanket, my blanket's gonna protect me, right?
Checks under the bed,
right? So one movie, right, that I saw, I'll say it right here, right now. I have friends, and you guys know Pause. I mean, like, they watch it and they were like, I can't. This is ridiculous, Uzair. I can't believe that you were so scared of this. But I watched this movie when I was in high school with a bunch of friends when we were on a trip. We were like in the middle of nowhere. So when we watched this movie, it made us really scared. It's this. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's that Spanish horror film Veronica.
I think I've heard it. I haven't seen it. No.
Yeah. So I watched it again, and admittedly, it's not that terrifying. But in the moment, it scared me so much. I mean, I swear, man, I was like, man, what did I just watch? It was just creeping me out. And you know what? That's really the only horror film that I've seen that's really.
I think a lot of like horror media is scarier in context. Like you don't understand the fear until you're like in those specific circumstances. Like I'm a huge fan of the remake of Resident Evil 2, and like at some point there's this guy Tyrant or Mr. X, depending on who you ask, that chases you around, right? Yeah. And he doesn't look that scary if you haven't played if you're just looking at it out of context. But like this whole game, you've been like creeping up on zombies, getting rid of them, and then this big guy shows up and you can't hurt him at all, and he just speed walks after you, and it's terrifying. And then especially you go into a safe room and you can hear his footsteps, and you can't tell exactly where they are. And you're just like, I'm not getting out of this safe room. This is terrifying. Like, out of context, it doesn't sound scary. It's just footsteps.
Yeah, no, but in the moment, it's so scary. And like the only other film, like now this isn't, I wouldn't say this is entirely a horror film, but this movie, like I guess because it was just so disturbing, it like freaked me out. Hereditary. I
haven't seen that. I've heard it's just really like disturbing now.
It's just really disturbing. I definitely think there's something really wrong with Ari Aster. Makes great films, but there's definitely something wrong with him because I did, that movie. Most movies like the movies that people talk about, like I don't know, what is it, like Annabelle, and what is that one movie? It begins with a C. The
Conjuring.
The Conjuring, right? Like I watched those and I was like, yeah, whatever, right? Like it's fine. It's not that bad. But Hereditary, just because it was so disturbing, just really scared me. And like one of my friends, like this is stupid. Like what I'm about to say now, this is dumb. So she referred the set of horror movies to me that were like Turkish horror movies, but they were about like jinn, right? Those things terrify me. They absolutely, like I watch like The Conjuring and all that, and I'll be like, this isn't scary. But because that and the movie Veronica are premised on like the idea of like jinns or demons, like, they just scare me. Like they don't even have to make sense. They don't even have to be well shot. Just the idea, just them mentioning that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't feel my voice.
Gets up to speed.
Yeah, dude. It's so, like I just grabbed it. That's what like I'm watching.
Yeah.
Like, it's so.
Yeah.
The
Hajj tonight.
Seriously, it's like I have to wake up. I cannot wait.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are well over our time, but it was an interesting conversation, so we had to keep it going. I had a lot of fun talking to you guys this past hour or so. And
I hope you had as much fun talking to us as we did with you, Uzair.
Oh, thank you, man. I had a blast, dude. And like, first of all, just so bored in quarantine, so I was just excited to talk with someone. But on top of that, this was great. I really had a great time.
Yeah. All right. That will be all for today. Be sure to follow us at A Cup of Coffee Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and email us at acupofcoffeepod@gmail.com. DM us, send us a tweet, or email us if you're interested in being on the podcast or just have some questions. We're always happy to answer. And be sure to check us out on YouTube, Spotify, and most platforms where you can stream podcasts. All right, and we'll see you guys in the next one.